So 10th edition Warhammer 40K has been confirmed by Games Workshop now, and alongside all of the hard details they confirmed on their live stream at Adepticon, we were also treated to this rather awesome new animated trailer for the new edition of the game, pitting Space Marines against the Tyranids, all while Rabute Gilliman delivers a rather inspiring monologue stating how the Imperium is beset on all sides, are gaining ground in the Imperium Nihilus, and are winning battles against the Alien and Xenos, at least up to a point anyway. This teaser trailer really does give us an awful lot of new clues though as to what sort of things are going to be coming in Warhammer 40k 10th edition, and the clues for this one are kind of similar to the Necrons vs Space Marines one that we had in 9th edition, where they're basically showcasing us a whole load of new specific miniatures which are going to be coming out alongside this, and as with the last one, I feel like if we've seen it in this trailer, it's almost certainly going to come out in a plastic miniature. I thought with that in mind we'll go through the trailer, look at some of the awesome action, and talk about the miniatures that Games Workshop is effectively teasing here. The trailer starts out largely with Gilliman ruminating on the state of the galaxy at the moment, setting the scene for what Games Workshop has confirmed is apparently going to be the Fourth Tyrannic War. His Indomitus crusade has been going rather well, beating back the traitors and the Necrons, and seems to largely have the upper hand, including against the Tyranids of Leviathan. However, as we now know, a new threat is stirring to the galactic west. The Segmentum Pacificus is going to come under heavy attack from the Tyranids from an unexpected angle, showing that they truly are grasping the galaxy between their jaws. Then the scene cuts to the action planet side, with a team of Space Marines fighting against some Tyranids. We've got a whole bunch of little termagants scuttling through a forest here, before a redoubtable squad of Space Marines put the Xenos to the torch, deploying some flamethrower technology kind of unusual for normal Primaris at the moment. We've already seen the Tyranid termagants shown off, but this is basically confirming that we are indeed getting a squad of Primaris with flamers, something that quite a lot of people were potentially anticipating since we saw that Black Templar armed with a Pyre Blaster. We've already had Plasma and Melter Primaris, so this one appears to be their flamer equivalent. It looks like the squad's got a leader who's armed with a combi flamer. I really wouldn't be too surprised if he turns out to be yet another flavour of Primaris lieutenant, and the sergeant of the squad with the flamethrowers is armed with a combi melter as well. It seems that the Primaris Marines are finally embracing combi weapon goodness. I'm sure Salamander's players will be pretty happy to have entire squads of Space Marines armed with flamethrowers like this. The flamethrowers don't appear to have a whole ton of trouble in dealing with the lesser Tyranid organisms. It's going to take more than a few gaunts to stop a squad of Space Marines, and they continue their advance into the jungle. Obviously there's bigger critters lurking out there. It looks like a fair few Space Marines who have come before them have met an untimely end, and it's not like they have all that long of a respite after that, as suddenly they're set upon by a rather big and vicious Tyranny Beastie with 4 big nasty claws. This guy's a much more serious threat, grabbing one of the Space Marines and obliterating with a bioplasma scream, tanking a whole bunch of bolter rounds, and then proceeding to charge down the rest of the squad. There's really not too much question as to what this guy can be. He's basically a Screamer Killer Carnifex, looking like he's getting an individual model again, as opposed to just being represented by the current Carnifex kit that we have. He's basically a modern interpretation of this really old classic 40k miniature. The 4 claw-armed limbs and the bioplasma scream attack are kind of specific for this, never mind being big and tanky enough to charge through a squad of Space Marines. Mr. Screamer Killer doesn't exactly have everything all his own way though. Just when he's about to chew through the Space Marine squad, he is rapidly halted by something with a lot more heavy firepower, and here we have revealed a Primaris Redemptor Dreadnought. This one seems to be armed with a bit more ranged gear compared with melee gear, and it seems that Games Workshop is continuing their trend of reinterpreting the Dreadnoughts. We've had the balanced version for the Redemptor, the close combat melee version that's like the Furioso called the Brutalis. I guess that this one will probably have a different fancy Primaris style name, but it basically looks like a modern interpretation of the missile launcher and las cannon arms Dreadnought. It does appear to be armed with just about the exact same things here. Like the Redemptor, it's also got some front mounted storm bolters as well. Looks like if you want a ranged flavoured Primaris Dreadnought, then Games Workshop now has you covered. It seems that that particular little fight is won by the Space Marines fairly handily, and then the action cuts away back to Gilliman being rather pleased for himself, but then back to an apothecary working in the dead of night, only to be snatched out of the darkness by some sort of clawed Tyranid organism sneaking up on him unawares. His grabton is thrown around, but his power armor manages to hold out, and even after being ambushed in the dark in the back by a Tyranid stealth organism, is still very much alive and fighting, trying to put them down with his bolt pistol. This guy appears to be a new apothecary model, and it looks like he's in Gravis armour judging by the cowling on the armour that he's got over him. You can see how it resembles the aggressor's one on the left here, even if we don't get the best look at the entire Space Marine while he's being attacked in the dark, presumably by lictors. Speaking of which, it's hard to imagine how these things could be anything else. We don't really get the most amazing look at them here. The flashes that we do get of the clawed hooks, though, do look very similar to the current models. They do seem pretty ideal for Games Workshop to remake in plastic, being an older Finecast kit for the Tyranids, and it would be a shame for them to go away. Striking out of the dark and ambushing their target unawares is their exact modus operandi. Then getting back to the main fight, battle is well and truly joined. The Space Marines appear to have engaged the bulk of the Tyranid forces, and they're definitely not having it all their own way anymore. The Dreadnought's taking some very heavy hits from living ammunition, lesser swarming Tyranids are jumping all over them, and they're fighting one-to-one battles with bigger, perhaps warrior equivalents. It does appear that help's at hand though, with a homing beacon shot into the earth, heralding the arrival of reinforcements. We get to see a fair few more of those combi weapon armed Space Marines in action here, both the sergeant with the melter gun and the lieutenant perhaps with the combi flamer, dealing out death and snapping off bolt shots as he charges through the fray. This section is fairly big on new Tyranid units that we're seeing here. It does look like we're getting an updated Biovore kit. We get rather a nice shot of them silhouetted against a red background, and these are one I most definitely would have predicted to get an update of one sort or another. They're an older Finecast resin kit, so it'll be quite nice to have those updated in plastic. Hopefully Games Workshop might make them a dual kit with the Biovore and the Pyrovore. That would just seem to make a lot of sense to me. The lesser swarming Tyranids appear to be Hormagaunts. The action in this moves quite fast, and the lighting in it's really quite moody and misty, so you don't get the most amazing shots of them. They don't look like they're armed with flesh borers though, it's 2 claws, and you see a fair few of them doing their bounding leaps through the air. Seems very likely indeed that they're going to be resculpted in a similar kind of way to the Termagants. Hopefully their model kit won't fall over quite as much as the current one does. Lastly, we've got what looks like some bigger battle line equivalents that some of the Space Marines are dueling, more or less as equals it would seem. It does appear that this guy might have come off second best though. The shots of these maybe aren't quite as amazing, not sure whether it could just be the lictors again from another angle or if it is a different warrior equivalent. From their appearance it doesn't look like they're actually Tyranid warriors, but perhaps something of a similar sort of stature with different weapon variations. In any case, they look like a Tyranid unit that's more than capable of running through a whole bunch of Space Marines. I guess it's not impossible that they could be an HQ character of some sort, maybe something akin to a Broodlord. Back to the fight, and it does seem that the Space Marine reserves have turned up on time and on target. We've got a rather cool realization of a Terminator teleport assault there, stepping out of glowing blue lights to deal death with storm bolters and power fists. They take a fair bit of time to focus on the Terminator with the assault cannon, spinning up the minigun on full purge mode to cut his way through a whole bunch of Tyranid reinforcements, blasting away the little gaunts, and we also get a Librarian Psyker enter the fray with a bolt of warp lightning, smiting some Tyranids down where they stand. The focus on the Terminators perhaps isn't the biggest surprise. They have been featured rather well in those previews that we got, and now Games Workshop have actually confirmed that they've got new models, very similar in appearance to the old ones, but bigger, badder, and upscaled. From this shot as well, I think that the guy front and centre looks like he could be a captain in Terminator armour. I think that's the iron halo above his head there. My guess is that he'd probably be one of the guys leading the Terminator assault in the actual launch box for 10th edition. He does look just a little bit more ornate than his fellows. They have shown off that we are indeed getting a snazzy new assault cannon as well. It seems that perhaps with these guys the biggest changes that they've made are to the guns. It looks like the storm bolters come with barrels that are hollow rather than flat. That Terminator Librarian I suspect will also be a character in the launch box on the Space Marine side. It does appear that he's in Terminator armour as opposed to Gravis. Looks like that's just his psychic hood there as best I can tell. Seems that he's armed with a great big force axe, which is kind of cool. Might be interesting to have a bit more of a melee focused Librarian, and I think it's just fairly cool that we seem to be getting Firstborn style Terminator characters once more, which looked like it might have been thoroughly off the cards throughout 8th and 9th. The assault cannon armed Terminator continues to cut a swathe through the Tyranids, blasting apart a couple of them that seem to be eating his fellow fallen Space Marines, but then after that a Tyranid jumps down from the sky, grabs him in his claws, and this one seems to be a pretty powerful threat, as it's literally enough to tear apart a Terminator in 2 claws, literally ripping the Space Marine apart. Then swiftly after this we have the entry of some Tyranid psychic beasties, Seems like they're not just keen enough to leave things with Zoanthropes, Neurothropes and Maliceptors, and these guys engage the Librarian. Again, another trio of new Tyranid units there, it would seem. These first ones look like some sort of Tyranid support unit. They look like they're going around eating dead Space Marines. Might be some sort of similar kind of feel to the Necron Canoptek Reanimator, perhaps something that isn't necessarily supposed to be on the front line, but is more of a support unit to other Tyranid forces. That winged Tyrannid looks like he means serious business. Something that's got wings and looks like a warrior type of equivalent makes me think of things like Tyrannid Shrikes, the winged warriors that had Forge World rules for really quite a long time, but I wouldn't be too surprised if this guy might turn out to be a character of some sort. Perhaps a winged Tyrannid Prime, or a leader for the Gargoyles perhaps, something along those lines. Then of course we've got our trio of Psychic Tyranids. It looks like we've got one great big brain bug there with a whole bunch of tentacles, flanked by two smaller auxiliary support Psychic Tyranids. I'd guess that these guys are going to be operating as a unit in game. I'd guess maybe he might operate as an elite character or something. Kind of has similar kind of vibes to the Ghost Kill with its stealth drones, operating with a big critter with some small supporters. Whatever this thing is though, it certainly seems strong enough to take down a Space Marine Librarian with a Psychic Blast he falls to his knees, and we get our last flurry of shots from the battle. The surviving Space Marines taking the fight to the Tyranids in earnest, and then we get a dramatic build-up to Space Marines defending a hill and raising a banner in a way that maybe doesn't feel too different to that Dawn of War intro cinematic that we had for Dawn of War 1 when it's Space Marines against Orcs. Cutting back to Guilliman one last time, we see the galactic map, various worlds marked dead or still currently in Imperial control, and setting the scene for 10th edition Warhammer 40K with the 4th Tyrannic War Space Marines against Tyranids. I guess by this point the vast majority of the Space Marines are unveiled. It does appear that we might have one more guy to enter the ring though, with this veteran with some sort of enormous bolt weapon. Kinda hard to tell what his deal is when you're looking so close up. Looks like he's got a scope on one eye though, and has a fairly slow rate of fire, but each shot that he does slug out with that big thing smashes a Tyranid dead. It'd be quite cool if he turned out to be something like a Space Marine fire support character, maybe something similar to a Vindicare assassin, but armed with an enormous bolt gun and dispensing with any major pretext of stealth. Overall, I think it's a really cool little intro to 10th edition Warhammer 40k, and it's pretty cool to see a teaser trailer that's quite so rich in terms of new units shown off. Games Workshop don't generally tend to make these teasers and just go mad with artistic license. I strongly believe that literally every single one of the units that you see here will be available as a plastic miniature coming out with 40k 10th edition. In any case, hope you've enjoyed a little breakdown of all that. There was a whole ton going on in these teaser trailers, so feel free to let me know if I missed anything or you think that any of my calls might represent something else. Look forward to learning any more bits about these new Tyranids and Space Marines down in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly be aiming to keep the coverage of 10th edition 40k coming as it comes out. I'm sure I'll have a whole ton more stuff to talk about between all the models, rules and lore that Games Workshop is releasing. This teaser trailer was far from the only thing that Games Workshop has shown us off for 10th edition 40k so far though. I'll leave a link to my review of their 4 reveals down in the video description. Feel free to check that one out next if you'd like to see more. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that one linked down in the video description below as well. It is the thing that allows me to keep on making videos like this quite so regularly, so if you are enjoying a lot, then any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, an enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.